topic is how to most effectively teach reproductive anatomy and menstrual cycle tracking. And just to give you a little bit of context for why we're doing this series, we're particularly trying to support anybody who's working as an educator or facilitator of menstrual health education who work in maybe remote areas or rural areas, low resource areas, work with populations who may not be very literate. And we've realized that there are special challenges of working with populations who don't have access necessarily to internet or Google, where they can just find out answers for themselves. Like, I think there's much more reliance in these settings on the facilitator to be really able to hold space and to be able to deliver quality content to people. And so it's for this reason that we've decided to put this series together, and we've really drawn on our resource pool of facilitators and educators all across India who have been connected with our work at Eco Femme and who we've really seen have real competence and experience and lots of really great ideas. So with that in mind, we did a series of focus group discussions about a month ago, and we sort of harvested a lot of ideas from some of the panelists that we have with you today. And based on that, we put the outline for this particular session together. So I'm really happy to introduce and welcome today our panelists for this call. We have Nelson Deb, who I've had the privilege and pleasure of working with over the last couple of years, especially in a project in the Northeast. And Nelson is himself a very experienced menstrual health in Assam and has his own organisation called Eco Hub. He has also been more recently involved in manufacturing cloth pads and has a real commitment to sustainable enterprises and has a real wealth of knowledge and experience. And I think it's also very inspiring to have a man who's working in this field who can really share so fluidly about this perspective of menstrual health education as a man. So welcome, Nelson. Then I'd like to introduce Angana, who I've known now since about 10 years. We first had the opportunity to work together in a project in rural Uttar Pradesh, which is the state she works in. She has a project called Project Kel, which is leading, and Project Kel is really devoted to working with play as a modality for teaching, and working especially with children is mostly, I think, the population that she's working with. And as a result of, I think, our early experience of working together in this project 10 years ago, she got really fired up by menstrual health education, the kind of impact that this work can have, and has developed her own very unique approach to teaching menstrual related concepts. And for this reason, I was really keen to have Angana as a very big part of this series, because I've been really inspired by her teaching approach as well, and have personally learned a lot from her. So welcome also, Angana. And Swastika, who is also another accomplished menstrual health educator. She works has her own project in Darjeeling in West Bengal, and is to social justice and all kinds of sort of community development projects and initiatives. And I haven't worked as closely with Swastika. I have met her and really feel that she has a lot to offer as well. And based on our preliminary call, I got really excited about what she could bring to this particular topic. So welcome also, Swastika. We're so happy to have you with us. And I know we have a lot of people here on the call who are probably also very experienced in your field, maybe some more than others. So what we're going to do is run this call for about an hour. And there's basically 3 aspects that we want to cover for content delivery. And then the last half an hour, we're really going to open up to all of you participants for your questions and to have really a time for interaction. So the 3 different, first of all, sorry, one more thing, I'd like to introduce my co-moderator, Lauren, who you saw pop up in, here she is, coming, that's Lauren. So she's also going to be supporting me in moderation today, and she's one of our very much loved and valued members at Eco Femme. And Pranati is also supporting and was very much part of pulling this series together, so she's also here with us. So going into what we're going to cover today, there's sort of 3 parts, and there'll be about 20 minutes on each of the sort of subsections. So the first part we're going to dive into is reproductive anatomy. just different ways in which we can teach it. What are the key concepts that we're trying to convey, and how to do that. And then we're going to talk about how do we also teach the idea of the different phases of the menstrual cycle, and draw on the experience of the panelists to understand the different approaches that might be possible to use, and what works well with different audiences, for example. And finally, we're going to spend about 20 minutes on menstrual cycle tracking to really unpack why this is important and how we can convey this somewhat complex idea, and how to break it down so that you're able to convey the value and the process of how to track a menstrual cycle with as much simplicity and ease as possible. So without any further ado, I'm going to launch us into the topic and invite, first of all, Nelson and Angana to kick us off. Maybe we'll start with Angana. And the question is to you, if you could start by sharing with us some of the effective ways that you've discovered to introduce and teach reproductive anatomy. And what are the kind of key takeaways that you're looking to convey to an audience when you start teaching reproductive anatomy? So over to you, Angana.
Thanks, Kathy. So while working with girls, so when we started out working in this space with young girls, we came in with diagrams and videos for the girls to know and see, because I also came from this place that everyone should know what their body looks like, and without really having a good understanding of the groups of girls that we were working with, because it took me a few sessions to realize how I got overwhelmed with the diagrams in my own biology class. And just reflecting on that feeling made me realize I was doing the same as an educator. I was pushing a lot of information, very perfect translations of the English names of different parts. And I immediately felt that that was not fair. So what I've started doing instead is, okay, so I call this a buffalo head thing. I generally call someone to come in the front of the room or group that we are sitting in. I ask them to draw a buffalo's head. And this is what I get, roughly. Yeah, so this looks like a buffalo's head. And then that leads to another set of conversation on how some people who probably love their buffaloes a little more than the others, they would also make their buffaloes wear little earrings. Yeah, this, and then I start my session, my discussion with a comic note that all girls in the world get periods because of buffaloes. So it immediately strikes this huge moment of laughter. We're starting on a very fun note. And it also leads to questions, which now they're asking. So it is not like me who's imposing answers at them. By making these lame statements, I get questions. And when I start getting questions, I incorporate that in how I start talking about the different parts of the body. And I always take a call based on the group that we are working with. For certain groups, when we are working with groups of girls who are school going and are also in the senior classes, for them, I try my best to let them know the names of different parts, because they are able to comprehend that. They are able to make use of that information. But if I'm working with a group of girls who are not regular schoolgoers, or they go to school for the name of it, but are not completely in the education mode as such, they get intimidated by big names. So, and I've never really gotten to use the word fallopian tube in my life for anything practical, except for the purpose of delivering sessions. So I've stopped seeing the point in letting people know the names of every part, unless they are mentally there to actually be able to receive these words. So that actually helps the session, because already this kind of information is taboo. It's not something that you talk about very openly. So it's already very heavy. So when we also throw heavy words at them, then it becomes double the pressure. One, to remember the names. Two is to understand the concept. So my focus is always on helping groups of people understand the concept much more than remember the exact names of parts. So that's something that I do. And then after this entire buffalo bit that I do, then I complete the diagram. And just by drawing it in the class while I am facilitating the session, it just makes the entire system less threatening, because they've just seen someone draw this in front of them. It is not a drawn image. So that way, the sense of familiarity towards the diagram increases. And then I have a story about how these two sacks are basically two different classrooms where there are like a million different girls stuffed together, and the principal is very strict. Principal is the brain, and suddenly one fine day the brain decides that the principal decides that it is going to allow one girl at a time to come out of the classroom. And but the challenge is that when you only once one of the sides can open, but sometimes the principal is happier and maybe they'll ask for 3 or 4 girls to come out, more than one girl to come out, or maybe one girl from both the sides to come out. And that is when the egg has to come out, and the egg has to decide for itself that to reach the main playground you have to go through a very long tunnel. It's dark, it's scary. What will you choose? Will you choose your freedom and walk through this dark alley, or are you going to sit in this crammed room? So the girls will choose our freedom. And that is how the egg comes out through the tube. And then the egg reaches here. This is the playground. The playground looks like a samosa. So making all these different concepts which are foreign to them sound very familiar by using familiar words and familiar images, so that they're able to retain the information. And when you come to the playground, how will you feel? It's already dark and you've been walking for very long. You say, we'll feel thirsty. And what would you want to do? I'll want to swim around in water. Okay, so that is how bringing the concept of blood being there. And then also, would you like to rest? Yes, we'd like to rest. And then I talk about the uterine lining, how that is like a little mattress that the brain has pre-decided that you will need. So it's already there. So I use this entire story to talk about periods in an understandable manner, like something that the groups across all ages and across all education backgrounds are able to understand the main concept behind how periods happen, why periods happen, and what the entire reproductive system looks like. Yeah.
Super. I love some of those images of the samosa and freedom seeking eggs and things like that. Thank you, Angana. Nelson, could you continue to take the idea of how do you tailor sessions? Like, you know, obviously there's a different way, and I'm going to just kind of hinted at it, but when you're working with different audiences, whether it's girls or women or even boys, there's a different way perhaps that you might approach the introduction of reproductive anatomy. So could you share with us a little bit about your experience and thoughts around that, please?
Sure, Cassie. So, especially when we're dealing with young girls in schools or in colleges, we want to know, like, where is the reproductive organ in their body? Do they even know where is it actually placed? So we run a small game and we say, okay, we're going to start from the head, and I'm going to run my hand down towards the bottom, and you will say stop where you think the reproductive organ is. So, you know, usually when we do this and we keep coming down, we usually say the stomach is where the reproductive organ is, a lot of girls. But then we take it a little more down and then we show them exactly where it is. Another thing is we do this and we ask them to put their thumb in their navel and then, you know, put the little finger down, and that is exactly where, you know, the uterus is. And then we also have this, I have a small kit that I got from Eco Femme. And in the kit, we have this beautiful uterus that we kind of show them. And when we are actually explaining this, I also make use of the board because, you know, you need to very quickly draw the uterus like how Angana did with the buffalo head. But I can just draw it like very quickly. So when I'm drawing it, they're all like very inquisitive to kind of see what the whole structure looks like. And then there are two ball-shaped things. And we pass this around in the classroom, and they kind of touch it and feel it. And yeah, so that's how we deal with girls in schools and colleges. With little more elder women or women that we work with in the tea communities or in the other communities, we really don't talk about you know, where the organ is, or we don't do this because most of them know, because they have already delivered a baby, or they're in the stage where they've got married and they know. So then it becomes a little easy. We kind of just tell them, okay, but do you know what is there in the reproductive organ? So we always make use of the whiteboard or the blackboard, and we draw it out, and then we explain each part. Similarly, even with the boys, we do this game with them, and we tell them, okay, but where do you think in the female body is the reproductive organ? So yeah, they also get it right. So it's never been very difficult with elderly women or with boys, but with girls, with young girls, this is really helpful. And this game of actually locating where the reproductive organ is, and also using the blackboard or the whiteboard. Yeah.
Thank you. I realize that there's probably a lot of different ways that these, approaches. And I think also there's no, obviously absolute right way, but I really appreciate just learning some of the different insights that you have from, just from your field experience and trying to make these concepts relatable and not intimidating and comfortable. Yeah, but I also really think that this thing of drawing is really quite interesting, rather than presenting ready-made images, but to allow these images to unfold in a more imaginal way is also quite interesting. This is something you also spoke to, I think, Angana.
And I also think,
I'd
Kathy,
like to then, sure, go on.
and I also think that, because we work at a lot of rural settings, we might not always, and it's a huge gathering. So having a small poster in your hand and showing it from a very far off from the stage or from where you're standing might not be very, people at the back cannot really see it. So when you have a big board at the back of you and you're making use of the whole big board, it really is clear, and, they can see it from far. Also, if you can project, and if you have a projector, and, you can show the whole big reproductive organ on the projector, that also helps.
Yeah, good point. Thank you. I'm going to now turn to swastika, and this idea too that, when we talk about menstruation, we're obviously, moving into the area of sexual education as well. And I'm just curious how you sort of navigate this. Do you draw a line? Where do you draw a line? How do you decide what information to cover and what not? How do you actually approach this topic, especially in rural settings when we know that sex education can be considered quite as a very sensitive and somewhat controversial area to get into? So just love to hear your thoughts around that.
Sure. So, in our sessions, especially when we are dealing, I have to deal with a larger audience, maybe it's sometimes it's at the rural areas where people, especially the teen workers, where they have never actually heard or talked about menstruation before, And sometimes I also deal with the students in the schools. So, and especially when we are talking about menstruation, sex education, when we incorporate this topic in the menstruation, it might be quite sensitive issue in terms of culture and all that, especially it's in the rural areas. So what I generally do is it depends on the audience. When I'm dealing with women, I describe the pregnancy part, the function of the reproductive system and how does menstruation occur. And in that only, I include this pregnancy. Pregnancy part is also included there. But when I'm dealing with a different audience, like for example, like school children and all that, for that, what I generally do is, I tell them, when a body is preparing for menstruation, when you start menstruating, and then what happens is, there's the uterus, the egg, travels from to the uterus, and then and when you reach a marriageable age, when you're about to get married, that time only um, uh, this thing. When you're about to get married, then only your blood it goes. So I try to uh, like bring a gap, in uh, when I'm talking about menstruation and pregnancy. I don't directly dive in the topic, but I try to generalize on a very detailed things about menstruation. And for the pregnancy part, I generally don't talk about it. But I talk about pregnancy and this relation in terms of menstruation and pregnancy with, if I'm dealing with, older age group women, but not with the students, school students.
And Swastika, the reason for that is primarily what? Is it cultural? Is it that you have a feeling that the girls are not able to really integrate that information at that age, or?
Yeah, so when I talk about menstruation, when I do this awareness session in schools, it's mostly on menstruation. But if I have to talk about pregnancy, then that will again require an in-depth understanding. I just can't just float on the surface, because pregnancy is like a sensitive thing, and just telling them about the only different pieces might sometimes they might get wrong messages also. So if I have to talk about pregnancy, then I think that will again require a detailed topic on menstruation. Yeah, I'm sorry, pregnancy. So that is the reason, I don't talk about pregnancy, but I tell them, later on when you grow up, when you reach a marriageable age, when you're about to get after marriage, when your body is preparing for when you have decides to have children, then that time this process happens. It's preparing your body. So that ways I try to draw a line between pregnancy and the menstruation topic.
Okay, thank you. I guess I'd like to ask Angana to speak to this too. And the reason I'd like you to take this question on is because I think I know that this is something that you've really thought a lot about, because you are working a lot with with children, and also you're working with them over long periods of time. So I think partly, context, as you rightly say, Swastika, is kind of everything. And sometimes, we're just inherently limited by time and the amount of opportunity we have to have contact with say, school-going girls. But I know you have longer term engagement, and I think this is a big question for all of us who are working as menstrual health educators, is this idea, is it too much information? And what's appropriate to share or not? And how do you know? Could you help us sort of make sense of this dilemma? And what have you learned from your experience?
So something that we've started realizing in the last 1 year is thanks to cheap smartphones and very, very cheap internet programs, younger children have access to a lot more information than they are ready to handle. And then that throws us in a spot, because we have 7 and 8 year olds who watch pornography videos, who regularly watch that on their parents' phones, because parents are illiterate. These kids are going to school, so they know how to be part of different groups or to type out different website addresses to be there. So cultural sensitivity, as Swastik also mentioned, is definitely something that we have to be extremely mindful of, because as I was saying the other time, in the last discussion as well, I've come here to do my job, I'll finish my conversation and leave. But if I leave with an irresponsible amount of right information, no matter how right it is, this child that has received this information is going back to the same community where they'll be slapped or they'll be murdered overnight in a place like UP, and no one will get to know. Because barely there is enough documentation of a person existing. So if someone's just died or someone's been murdered, there's no way of figuring out if that person ever existed. So that's how complicated the scene in Uttar Pradesh can be. So a personal agenda that I also carry is to make sex sound positive, because of the entire taboo around it and what makes children to hide from their parents and look out for pornographic material. So there's always this middle point that I used to struggle with, and now, because I think I tell this to myself a lot, that cultural sensitivity first, my personal agenda to be brought into this entire scene at a more convenient pace. So I've started using neutral sounding words which are still positive. So for example, when I do the entire samosa playground with the egg has come out, then I add stuff like, how do you think children are born? Can a woman just sneeze and there's a baby coming out? So that adds that humor element. At the same time, it makes girls comfortable enough to want to share a little more. And that is how they start talking about boyfriends and all, not completely openly, but because they'll be judged. So it's very important to also be actively listening the entire time, so that we're able to pick on certain words they're using and use the same words in our conversation. And based on these little murmurs, it gives me a sense of the kind of information that already exists. And also by the change in expression and body language, I get a sense of how much will they be comfortable with. And based on that, I decide how to go forward. So sometimes I say stuff like, because the children already know that you have to be with a man to get pregnant. So I say something like, so when you're waiting alone in this park, after you waited, you walked so long to reach this open space, what would you like to do? A lot of them end up saying, we would love to play with our friends, meet our friends. So then I bring this question, who do you think is the best friend of the egg that stays in a girl's body? And then there are lots of guesses, and they're encouraged to come up with the most creative answers. And by the end of it, I say that there's this little friend that lives in a boy's body as well. And when that friend meets the egg, that's when a fetus is born. So that way the concept is introduced without really crossing lines. And also it's said very positively. So no one thinks of like the first impression that a lot of girls might be getting about sex would be from a workshop like this. It is not heavily secretive or said in a manner that makes girls feel uncomfortable about sex. Now, if from the murmurs and the whispers I've figured that they are comfortable, some of them might be married in the group, that is when I start using neutral sounding words, safe sounding words, like for sex would be like sambhog, sharirik sambandh. And I add a little bit of drama in how I talk about it, so they get the context. So I try to talk like the mother-in-laws in Hindi serials, and she's active with her boyfriend. What would that mean? And through the response, I get to know what they're thinking of, and then I use that to weave that into my conversation. Now, generally, for a discussion like this, if we do not have permission, or we do not know for sure that we are going to meet them again, I generally do not enter the entire space of sexuality and sex altogether. But if I know that we are going to meet these children a couple more times, that is when I make it a point to discuss a little bit more about relationships, so that I know I'm going to meet them again, and then we can have a better conversation. And I always leave this conversation on the note that this is something we will discuss the next time we meet. So that way I've introduced a topic, but I have not spent a lot of time on it because my focus for today is periods. And then I know that I can build on that. Now, there are certain groups of children who we've been working very, very closely with for the last 3 or 4 years. For them, we have much deeper conversations. We talk about sex, safe sex, contraception, consent. We bring in that aspect as well. But that would not be a session. That would not be the quality of a session that I would push into a group where I know that I'm probably meeting them just once, maximum twice. So depending on the number of interactions we have, I decide what to prioritize and how much to discuss.
Yeah, excellent points. And again, a lot about context informing the decision making around that. And some lovely illustrative examples as well. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to shift gears to our second thematic for today, realizing that each of these sort of little bites that we're taking into these topics are really the tips of an iceberg. But I'd like to talk a little bit about the menstrual phases, actually, how the different phases of the cycle and how we convey these concepts of the menstrual cycle. And maybe, would you be willing to continue with that theme? Like, how do you actually convey the different stages of menstruation when you're teaching this?
So my number one focus while talking about this part of the curriculum is on expressing, like emphasizing a million times over, that all our bodies work at our own paces, because that is one big fat problem. I've figured that everyone's waiting for a 28-day period. Like your next period has to start on this day, and that creates a lot of panic. And over the last few years of working in different parts of UP itself, we've heard such horrible stories about some girl whose periods got delayed by a week, and then the mother also started pressurizing her that you need to tell me you're sexually active. The girl was so embarrassed with all the chatter around, and how she goes and commits suicide, and everyone's happy that chalo, this shameless girl is dead. And the organization that was working in that community, they are completely zapped because they don't know how to deal with it. So keeping stories like these in mind, I feel it becomes extremely important to let people know everyone does not have the same cycle. So once you start having a conversation with your friend about when your periods began and when her periods began, just because she gets it in 30 days does not mean you will also get it in 30 days. So I think again, it comes from the same place that I was talking about in the last conversation, that as an organization or as an individual or as an initiative, we need to have an alignment. So the alignment for my program is on attitude. So my entire program is packaged to deal with the attitude side of things. So I take the example of a watch. A lot of them would be wearing watches, or at least I'll have a phone and a laptop. Or basically I try to have at least two different people with two different time telling gadgets, and I ask them what's the time. And almost every time there is at least a 1 minute difference. And that is what I use as an example. But we are both wearing watches. Both our watches or both our phones are telling the time. So why are the times different? And that is what helps them understand that, yes, both gadgets are telling us time, but this might have a faster pace, that might have a slower pace, and that's exactly how a girl's body works. So that is how I start this bit of my conversation. And then I help differentiate between the menstruating period and how the entire menstrual cycle does not mean the 5 days or the 7 days that we are menstruating, but the menstruating period is there. And then there is this entire time the egg takes to walk through this tunnel to reach the playground and wait for a friend. If the friend is not coming, the egg will leave the park. So I keep going back to my story. So there is a repetition of the basic information on why periods happen. It also helps them understand the menstruating cycle is the entire time that the egg takes from the ovary to reach the uterus and out. Yeah, and I think the next question on white cycles would be shared by Nelson. So I could maybe add something more after he speaks.
Sure. Yeah. So, yeah, Nelson, maybe you could speak to also, well, actually, if there's anything you want to build on in terms of what Angana has just shared, but also how you approach the topic of vaginal discharge. Also, as a guy, is there any difficulty for you around that? And how do you sort of introduce these ideas?
So I think, with the menstrual cycle, there are a lot of questions that we get from the older women. I mean, when I say older women, I mean like, 20 to 25 onwards. They want to know when is the right time to get pregnant, when is the right time to have sex, and, when if you have sex, you will not have a baby, because they're also having a lot of Anganwadi and a lot of Asha workers, who meet them more frequently and talk to them about contraceptives and when to conceive and all of that. So they are sometimes not very clear. So at that time, when we actually talk about the menstrual cycle, and we also have this beautiful chart that I received from Eco Femme, which has colors, and it has colors of red where you're menstruating and when is the right time to kind of conceive, and then so it's beautifully designed. It has got colors, which is very easy for people to kind of at least remember when you actually see colors and patterns. So I have been using that chart. I don't have it right now, but that's a very good tool to kind of, sometimes when we just speak, it becomes a little difficult for people to kind of, take in. But when we show them in terms of illustrations or pictures or charts, it's much more easier for them to kind of remember. So that's the thing. To add on to Angana's, but about the white discharge, I think this is a part when we come at a later stage when we've finished talking about everything, and then we ask them, do you have any questions for us? We do not get into that immediately. And then because we want some questions from them. So this is a common question that we get from a lot of girls who say that, what is this white discharge? How much is it good? How much is bad, or stuff like that? So it's easy for us to say, because again, there's a beautiful chart that Eco Femme had shared once, how much, how thick. So if we are able to use a projector, we put that up on the screen. We tell them that, you can insert your finger into your vaginal opening and see how sticky it is or how light it is. And how, that white discharge is actually normal before the periods, or even after your periods are over. So because a lot of girls hear that, why is this there? So when we actually tell them that this is a way of, it's a procedure and which is normal and it happens to all girls and women in the menstruating age, then they feel, okay, so it's just not with me, it happens with the others who are sitting in the room as well. And everybody then acknowledges and they nod their head, because they don't get this atmosphere to kind of even talk about white discharges before. So they get this space where, they're talking and the other one is listening and they're acknowledging. So then they feel, okay, this is not something bad, it happens to everybody. But how much is bad, or when the color changes, what do you need to do? So these are the things when we show them and we tell them that, okay, if the color changes from whitish to yellowish or greenish, then that might be of concern. That is when you need to probably meet a doctor. But otherwise, the chart helps. If we kind of show it on the screen, that helps, because that image is so clear and it's so easy for people to understand, because it even shows the thickness of the white discharge, the vaginal secretion and all of that. So it's not always been very difficult to kind of confront or talk about this for us at a later stage, once we've finished talking about periods and how everything happens. And we come to that stage when we want them to ask this question to us. So, and at that time, I think they are pretty much set and they're comfortable to talk to us, and they open up and they can really talk about, blood clots that come out, or if it's smelly, or, if it is too much and stuff like that. So we give them enough time to kind of open up and understand, and then later on ask this question.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's clearly something that seems to provide a lot of reassurance to address this topic of white discharge, because it's obviously a normal part of the menstrual experience, but it tends to be sort of eclipsed by the more overt bleeding phase. So thanks for sharing those insights. Angana, you want to say something build on that?
Yeah. So just based on my experience in Uttar Pradesh, the white discharge is looked at as a sickness, because there's no one who talks about it, and generally there are those big wall paintings that if you have any private health issues, you should come and meet this XYZ quack. And white discharge is generally something that is mentioned on the wall along with these advertisements. So almost everywhere, let's say in most places that I've worked in UP, the general understanding that girls have is that they're sick because they have the white discharge, and then they have all sorts of reasonings behind it, that supposedly the bone is melting out from the vagina, and what if you consume too much of rice, that is when the white cycle happens. So a lot of these reasons that they come up with, they kind of have overlaps with how the female body is viewed as something dirty, and that is coming out as dirty because that's something they've been told so much. And one of my favorite go-to lines is, do you think a vagina is a drain? And that is something that actually helps young girls think, and even women think that, yeah, a drain is something where the dirty water, the dirt of the house is running into. Am I actually saying that my body has a little drain where all the dirt comes out from? And that is when we talk about what does potty mean, going to potty mean, what is that and what is this. So that helps draw a line that what happens in the bathroom in the morning, or when you go out in the field, depending again on the group that we're talking with, that is the unused things of the body get leaving your body, but periods is not that. And then another example that has worked for me 100% of the times is, sometimes I just make all the girls get up and start running, and for 15 seconds everyone has to run really fast on the spot, and then I make them sit. You're not allowed to drink water. How are you feeling in your mouth? It's dried up. Okay, now drink water. After drinking water, how is your mouth feeling now? It is moist, it's feeling nice. Are you more comfortable now than when your mouth was dry? So of course, we're more comfortable now. So the white discharge is actually like the spit, like the saliva for your vagina. And drawing this relationship has been extremely helpful, because that helps them look at the white discharge as a normal positive thing happening in their body. At the same time, we also talk about we talk about different symptoms that could be there for infections. Looking out for which they could decide if they need to go to the doctor. It is about the color of the fluid that is coming out, how sticky does it feel. So again, I draw the correlation with spit. So if you are experiencing cough and cold, what is the color of the saliva then? So they say it becomes greenish or yellowish depending on how much cough I have. So exactly. So do you have yellowish or greenish saliva coming out of your mouth on a normal day? No. So what does a green or a yellow spit in your mouth mean? It means that we are sick. So then that helps them understand that if your discharge is not clear, it's not whitish, if it's anything else, then you might need to be more careful for the few other symptoms that we're talking about. You might be sick. And that does not mean it is going to be some life-threatening sick. But basically, we just try to calm them down about what could be certain symptoms that they should keep an eye out on. Yeah. So this is
excellent.
Kathy, I want to add something
I like
quickly.
that analogy very much. Thank you. Please go ahead.
I love all your practical examples, Angana, and also that I think, Nelson, you mentioned that sometimes you show the pictures or that are in the facilitator guide. I don't know if I caught that correctly, but I get excited about this because I know that the first time I ever saw pictures of the different kinds of discharge was in an Eco Femme facilitator guide. And that was actually one of the most enlightening things, because then I think when I thought of cycle tracking, it's really about mapping 4 to 6, 7, whatever days of bleeding. But when I saw these photos, I realized actually it's mapping something any single day. Like I'm always at some stage in my menstrual cycle, and if I can understand the pattern that discharge, which is a self-cleaning fluid, I mean, our bodies are so clever, follows, that's actually very empowering, because I'm not just understanding blood, I'm understanding the whole story. And so I realized this might be probably a little bit more advanced than what you do if you just had one session. But how I teach it to ambassadors in Eco Femme is with WEX. You know that it follows this pattern of WEX, WECS, which is your discharge is watery at first, so it's clear and it's thinner. And then it moves to egg white, which is sort of a little more opaque and like egg white, a bit more sticky. Then C stands for creamy, so the color's getting a bit darker and it's a bit thicker. And then lastly, S for sticky. And then how you can also understand that in terms of fertility or your ability to conceive during the menstrual cycle is you picture you're the sperm, right? So what's the visibility like? When it's W, it's watery, it's very clear and it's a bit more slippery. When it's egg white, it's super slippery and you can still see through it. But as it becomes creamy or sticky, visibility is going down. It's very hard to get through, and that's how you know you're approaching your menstrual cycle. But I really, I feel like discharges or vaginal mucus is a really untapped kind of aspect of menstruation, and that's what I love about, you know, the menstruation education. It can take you down all these different paths. So I really enjoyed listening to you both. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that piece into, Lauren. I think it's really valuable. Okay, we're going to move along in the interest of time to the last sort of thematic, which is around menstrual cycle tracking and actually how to teach it. I'd like you to kick off on this, Swastika, and tell us a little bit about why you think it's so important to teach menstrual cycle tracking in the first place. Why even bother?
Yeah, so in every part of our session, we do this menstrual cycle, tracking. So sometimes it is more of a participatory, where first we brief them and we explain them this is the thing, and then we do some group activities where we give them certain 28-day cycle and we tell them to do. So the more intimately you know about your own body and its cycle, the more closely you can recognize if there is any kind of problem or any kind of irregularity which may happen, so so that change, if you track your cycle on a regular basis and if you practice that, and what happens is you will be able to connect with your body more. So and you'll also know if any kind of if anything is not going right, that can be tracked to the cycle also, because when regular cycles become irregular, then they may the problem is not always pregnancy, because first thing what we think is whenever when if you are sexually active and if you miss your period for a month, the first thing what we think is okay, I'm pregnant. But that is not always the case, because they may be underlying your body might be showing some signs that something is not functioning well, and it may have a deeper issue hormonal disbalances, or liver issues, and you may also have some thyroid problem as a part if you are if your cycles are not regular, and not only that, but this cycle tracking is also very helpful for students in school, because as part of our intervention, when we were doing this WASH program in schools, most of the teachers, they complained that students are generally not prepared because they don't know when their cycle is coming. So what happens is they come to the school and suddenly their period starts, and then they have to take leave and just go home, and they'll miss the classes, and so the cycle tracking is very helpful for the students as well, because if they if they know when the cycle is approaching, they are ready with their menstrual products also, they can carry with them, and also this irregular cycle may also if you have any problems with regard to menstruation, and if this irregularity happens, then you can also go to the doctor and help him recognize more deeply the problem that you may be having, and tracking period will women also commonly miss their periods when they experience this menstrual changes, when they start exercising routine, if there is changes in that, or even through stress. So these all issues, because of this all problems also, it'll help you to know if your cycle tracking, if you do this cycle tracking on a regular basis, it may help you to understand your body well, and also to know this if there are any other issues, underlying issues that you may be facing health wise. So yeah, so because of all this. Thanks, Kathy.
Great. No, maybe you could just continue on. So you've spoken to sort of from the whole spectrum of troubleshooting, what could be going on if there is a disruption in the cycle, to preparedness for making sure they're ready for maybe when the next period is due. A little bit about body literacy. I think if we've got time, I'd like to hear other voices on this, but I'd also like to help us figure out how do you actually teach it. Like I think this is one of the more challenging concepts to convey in a menstrual health class, is actually how do you do it, especially if the participants are not using an app. So
Yes.
how do you convey this? How do you actually teach it?
So we have developed this IEC, different kind of information materials, communication materials, and where we have this whole cycle drawn there. So as when we do this, when I'm teaching the children, or maybe the older women, so it's like it's in a very simple way, without using any technical terms, like sign, and without using any signs. It's just a very, very simple method, so that the information what we are trying to give can be easily understood by them. So it's through these posters that we have developed these posters. So through that only, like we see that okay, so your periods, you have this red dots, which I think Angana was also talking about, that in the Eco Femme chart also, which you all have like provided us. So we use that only, and this red dots are your, like and we also try to connect the menstrual cycle with the reproductive anatomy. Like first we give a session on this reproductive anatomy, like the function of this uterus, and this ovary and all that, and we try to connect that with the menstrual cycle. So in that way, the the thing is more clearer to them, because they can really connect the both. And then you have this this phase, the ovulation phase, and then the 4 phases of menstrual cycle. So that is how we try to do it through like a different communication materials.
Okay, it's like a calendar, what you're speaking to, in a way, how like the girls actually use a calendar for practice, or like working with their own cycle, or?
Yes, most of them, like, they don't use this mobile apps, which we have.
Yeah.
So it's through the calendar way only, and they track their periods through that calendar method.
Okay, super. I'm going to just quickly check if Angana or Nelson would have anything to add from your experience. Excuse me, how you, either why you think it's important, if there's anything you'd like to build on what Swastika said, and any sort of tips or tricks that you found to convey this somewhat challenging concept to girls in particular.
Yeah, so I think, Cassie, with the younger children that we deal with, who've just started their periods, it's a huge concern for them, because they might, or they usually miss their periods. And then, it's a huge thing, like they get traumatized, and, they become fearful. Why have they missed? Because they don't know that, at least for the first 1 year, it is normal for a adolescent girl who has just started her periods to have irregular periods, or maybe just have 4 times in a year. So it is so important that we convey this message across to them in the presence of the teachers, so that, even when they're talking to their mothers or the family, the teachers are aware that, okay, this is like a right information that's being passed on. And then we say, like, are you always aware that, whenever you're traveling, or when you're coming to school, do you always know that, you're going to have your period? So it's usually like a lot of girls don't maintain a calendar, or they are not very aware, because it just does not happen on time. It could just happen 2 to 3 days prior, or 2 to 3 days after the expected date. So again, we use like this beautiful chart that Eco Femme has designed. You can see, you can actually track your period here. So whenever we do our sessions, we make sure that we take these Xerox, and we distribute this to the students, and we teach them how to use this. It's very simple. They have day 1, day 2, day 3 till day 30, and then you have your date below the days. So when you start your period, we ask them to write the dates. So, that way they can actually track, and we ask them to use this chart for at least 5 to 6 months, so that, they know. So on day one, they put the date, like for example, today is 5th. So they have their period on the 5th of April. So they put it under day one. So for this month, if they have periods for 3 days, so then they put 5th, 6th, and 7th. So that way, when they track this for at least a minimum of 6 months, they actually see how is their body reacting. Is the body in sync? Are they having easy or let's say, are they having any difficulties? Is there have they missed their periods? We've put a place here which says notes. So you can actually make notes of all the things that you think is not normal, or if you've missed, or if there's heavy bleeding, or if there's less bleeding, if you're feeling weak. So we ask them to practice this and make notes over there, so that at the end of 5 or 6 months, when they look back into the chart, they can actually see how beautifully or how easily, or if there's any disturbance in their cycle. And then they can rectify that. And we teach them of how they can actually get this back into track by having a good lifestyle, balanced diet, and exercise. And we again have these small handouts that we provide them. This has little information about menstruation, what to eat during your periods, what are the products, about basic hygiene, not to use chemicals and other materials in their vaginal openings during periods. Also, a little information about cervical mucus, about carrying pads, about maintaining a calendar. So this is like a small handout that goes out to them, and this is the tracking chart. So these two are like a mandatory thing that kind of go out. I think also with the older women, the chart really helps. So if they don't use the chart, we can always teach them to use their calendars at home. So yeah, I think we use these two to just make it easy for them to kind of track their menstrual cycle.
Great, thank you. I'm aware of the time, and I'd like to open up for Q&A. There was one more kind of question, but I think it's been quite touched on by most of the panelists about how do you convey also when it's time to sort of seek help, like if the symptom is showing up that is not within the range of normal, that is an indication. So I don't know if anybody wants to speak to that, or if any of the panelists feel that there's something that they're burning to say that hasn't been said. Maybe there was something to respond to a question that they didn't get to speak to, and then we'll open it up in general for the participants on the call to ask their questions. So is there anything else you're feeling? Yeah, I'm gonna.
I just want to share a little bit about the period tracking bit. Generally, the way I go ahead with a session is I have a prioritization that depends upon the context of each group. So there's a master curriculum that everything that needs to be covered, but that's never the exact curriculum that is always delivered, because we also want to be respectful of the learning pace, of the space being created, of how much they are able to take in and how much they want to take in, and based on that, draw the line. So somehow the period tracking is the one thing that is the first that I am able to take out, because the calculations of it becomes very complicated. And even though if we're working in schools with school-going girls, because that is how bad the state of education is. So it's easy for young girls maybe to understand basic calculations because they have to deal with money at home. But to track an entire cycle, that becomes very complicated. So yes, among the more receptive populations, we talk about using the calendar, as both Nelson and Swastika said. Another way that I don't completely work for, but then just to give young girls, especially if I'm working with girls who've already been married off before they've turned 18, for them to understand, because a lot of them say that they were forced to get married, or else they were okay with being married, but they don't want children. And contraception is not something that the husband understands, and they do not have the power to say no if the husband wants sex. So in that case, just try to help them understand their body a little bit, that during that 1 week in a month that you can actually see the white discharge on your underwear, that should give you a slight hint that that's your fertile period. So then maybe stay away from intercourse. And you could figure out other ways of pleasure and other ways of not being involved. If they want to have further conversations or other ways of pleasure and all, that's a separate conversation we have. But with those figures, because again, I think one of the very important questions that you had planned for this session was also how much information is too much information. And within one group, even the intellectual levels are not homogeneous. A lot of it depends on the opportunities they have, on the exposure that they have. So, so for these additional discussions, we try not to take up the time of the entire group. We let them know that there was a question asked, which is related to safe sex. If there is anyone interested, you could please stay back. That everyone has this option of choosing to stay or not. And so that is one way out that I've figured. If there is a group that's not understanding how to track their cycle. Another thing that I wanted to share, because this is also a discussion we are having for menstrual educators, that how much we rely on props or communication materials has to be, like, we have to leave some of that space to context as well. Props might work amazingly well with certain groups. It might not work at all with a few other groups. So it so happened that I had a series of experiences where the fascination was for the projector, or was towards a beautiful chart that was shown. Like, that was so attractive that the main content was lost because the colors were so pretty. And like one of the first surveys that we did with Eco Femme also, in the first village we had worked together when we went for the follow-up, is that periods are dirty. Why do we have such beautiful pads? How can we ever use this? Or they've saved it up. I'll give it to my daughter when she gets married. The daughter is like 6-7 years old. So the relationship between something very beautiful used to talk about periods, that itself becomes a challenge for a lot of girls. Again, this is based on my experience, does not have to be true. So my request and my suggestion would be for all menstrual educators to be open also to see the reception for whatever it is that they're using. Sometimes going all organic with your content delivery might not help. Sometimes going completely prepared with charts might not help. So as a all-round educator, either we need to decide this is what I'm good at, this is what I cannot do, or else try to grow ourselves by seeing what is working in what context and using that as a lesson for the next time we go for an interaction.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks again for just that piece of the context awareness and not being too reliant on a one-size-fits-all solution. I'm going to open it up now to our participants. I'm sure there's a lot of people with different kind of questions that either addressing what's already been talked about, or maybe thoughts that have come to you in the course of the call. And also, Lauren, if you'd like to take a more active role in moderating the Q&A, feel free to jump in as you wish, and just, yeah, that we can now engage a little bit more, hear your questions, and continue the learning from the panelists. So if anybody's got any questions, yeah, let us know, raise your hand. Or not even necessarily always questions. It could also be reflections or thoughts that have occurred to you, maybe new insights that have come to you through the course of this conversation. But this is your time now.
Just while people are maybe mulling over their questions, I think the biggest thing I always get out of it is I love all the little examples from on the ground. And like what I wrote down was the importance of having a really strong story when you're teaching the reproductive anatomy, whether it's a samosa shaped playground, which is your womb. I love that. Or I know that our facilitator, Calvi, really talks about the eggs in fish, because we have a lot of fish eating populations where we live in Tamil Nadu, and people recognize the fish eggs, so you can liken that to ovaries. But to really use these strong stories which are in people's words, and how I would have thought before is it's important to use local language, but what I hear is it's even more than just the technical terms. For example, uterus in Tamil is gabapai. more than even using that, it's using their word. So if samosa is better even than the local language word for uterus, that's much better. And then the repetition, Angana, you mentioned, to keep using those over and over again is, I mean, for any teaching is great. And then Nelson, so I got that really kind of strong story language thing when you were talking, Angana and Nelson, this idea of embodied learning, you know, like exactly where is it in your body? And it really, for me, shows different ways that you can take this information off the page. It's not just this diagram, as you both said, I think, that you walk in with. And I think that's quite empowering then, no? Because it's your language and your body, not some biology lesson in a textbook. Yeah, so thanks for sharing those practical examples. I don't know if you have a menstrual kind of story that you tell to Swastika, like, so Calvi, our facilitator, does like a fish story and also talks about dogs, and because people, you know, they see dogs mating and whatever, or you can, whatever examples you can draw, and maybe, I don't know if there are some you use, or Nelson, if you had any more. It's always kind of interesting to hear these because they stay in your head, where humans are storytellers, no? That's what's memorable.
Hi, so I also wanted to pitch in and say one of the reasons I was so excited about today's session is because knowing about emotions and hormones along with the cycle tracking has really helped me and my friends to understand and chart out our just daily life, when I can take up new projects or when I should go for traveling, meet new friends. It sounded almost unbelievable that I could have this kind of knowledge, and I don't know, it just felt so powerful knowing, yeah, I can like totally manage all of this, handle this if I know what part of um sorry what part of menstrual phase I am in, luteal, or but I'm also wondering, because I've had biology textbooks or I'm coming from like a CBSE background, or like I've studied, it's easier for me to remember luteal phase, down, ovulation, feeling pretty confident. Like it's easy for me to remember these, but I'm wondering, does it ever come up in rural areas? Do you talk about emotions and mood swings? Yeah, thank you.
Was that a question at the end, Pranthi, like you wanted to?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So, in my experience, the kind of like the peri-urban community where they have access to phones and then they have access to forwards. PMS is a joke. Premenstrual syndrome, it's a joke, and it is supposedly an excuse for girls to back out of activities. Now that is one narrative, and another aspect to this also is that for a lot of girls, because they're made to feel horrible about their periods, and there are a lot of activities they are restricted from participating in, and there could be practical reasons also, not having the right kind of flow management products and all, like all of that combined together makes a lot of girls feel that being on my periods is a good reason to not participate in something, although a girl might not actually be restricted physically. Like maybe she's not feeling as much pain, maybe she's actually wearing the perfect product that just gives her the right kind of support, but because I'm on my periods, I have the right to back out. So that is also something that we bring into our discussion, that yes, if it is about mood, like you are feeling lazy, you want to back out, that's like one thing, but because I am on my periods, I will not participate is not really a good enough reason, because it is just like a normal thing that is happening to your body. So we encourage young girls to listen to their bodies and not so much as listen to what is being told to them, because what is being told to them is nothing very nice about their bodies, about periods. So if they are listening to their body and the body is telling them they are feeling exhausted, they are feeling angry, or they are feeling irritable and they want their own time, yes, please go ahead with that. So helping young girls especially to understand this difference between what the body is saying against what you're being told, I think that is super important. And again, because of a lack of vocabulary and lack of conversations also, so based on my experience of working in UP, almost every girl feels irritable. Maybe they feel a lot more anger, they might feel a lot more hunger during the periods, but the word they use is generally irritable. So vocabulary also becomes a challenge when we have these kind of conversations. And maybe again, because of vocabulary, we find urban school going English speaking girls use certain words to express about their mood swings and their feelings and emotions. It could be because they know the words. It could also be because they think that's the cool thing to do. So there are constant context drawing that I feel we need to continue to do, because not always is someone suffering through their periods, but at the same time, not always is someone using periods or popular notions as an excuse. So we need to be careful, but also be accommodating to both sides, because we do not know what actually the other person is going through. Like, we don't want to force someone to do something because we feel that this individual is not experiencing pain, but is trying to use periods as a reason to back out. So it's kind of complicated, but then space needs to be given to both kinds of thoughts that might exist.
Yeah, thank you for getting on this. And also, I'm wondering, are you able to take that, what do you call that, seeing PMS as a silly thing or as a joke? Are you able to take that notion out of it?
Yeah, so we're able to discuss that in terms of hormones, and again, talking about the principle being the brain. And sometimes the principal will instruct someone to do something and the child might not want to do that. So for example, the principal wants you to take 5 rounds of the playground, and you as an individual do not want to do that, but the brain has asked you to. So what will you do? The automatic answer is that yes, I'll have to go and take the rounds because the principal is asking me. So that's how we draw the correlation, that yes, your brain is the principal. So your brain is asking you, sending you messages through your hormones that you're feeling irritable. So it's not something that you're doing out of choice. It is something that your brain is making you do. So trying to draw these kind of associations have been helpful that in young girls understanding also that how everyone's brain is not the same, like again about how everyone has a different clock. So we keep going back to previously discussed concepts, so that this entire aspect of individual bodies reacting or responding to different things based on their own processes is focused on.
And we also have a question. Thanks for clarifying that, Angana. We also have a question from Alfonso. If you want to jump in and ask your question, go for it.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay, so it was really a very good sharing. Got to know many things. And I work in an organization named Uddani. So we are taking this initiative to start off awareness generation programs regarding menstruational hygiene. It was really a very fruitful sharing. I really got to know many things. I'm really happy that I had a chance to attend this webinar. But actually, there are certain things which are unclear, and I would request if you can share certain materials regarding menstruational hygiene, especially regarding cycle tracking. As you're talking about using beautiful charts to convey the information to women. So since we basically work with middle-aged women, so if you can share certain materials which can help us as an organization spread more awareness in West Bengal here. That was my question, if you can. Thank you.
Alfonso, I think if you're able to share your email ID with us in the chat box, we'll follow up and share with you some materials that might help you more practically wrap your head around how to actually go about. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Hi, Angana.
And
I
mentioning
have a question actually.
there are other people on the call who also are working. Yeah, who's that?
Shivani, it's just asking her.
Shivani, go right ahead.
Yeah, hi Angana and the Eco Femme team and all the people are here that share this very empower and very powerful session. Really, it is very wonderful. So yeah, I am Shivani basically and working in the district Surendnagar, Ahmedabad, Gujarat, and I am working with the rural areas with adolescents girls to make them empower in the menstrual, like how they can manage their periods in a well way, because they haven't any kind of information as I observed initially. So like in school, in government school, there is no female staff, and parents also used to skip this topic. So adolescent girls, they don't know the meaning of the periods, right? So I started my project with the girls to create the group, and we decided some time, and I had some material from the AKRSPI which I'm working on. So I took the sessions with the girls. But now my question is, like, in the government school there is no female staff, right? So I am facing some struggle, like how to motivate the male staff to teach this topic in a regular way in their classroom, and especially to keep in the mind in the rural area, and like they are male staff. So is there any kind of suggestions? Please suggest me.
We're looking at you, Nelson.
Okay, so I think we've come across a lot of government schools where not just the male staff, but even the female staff are very, they have reservations of talking about reproductive health, menstrual hygiene. So it's just not with men, but even women staff as well. But I understand where there are schools where there are only male teachers. What you can do is, you can talk to the elementary school education department, or the higher secondary, or let's say the high school department, not the schools, but they have like a board. So if you speak to them and then tell them that you would want to conduct, and this is the scenario and this is what you found out, and you would like to kind of do a training for all the male teachers, write a letter to them and tell them about what you want to do, how you want to do it. And I think they should agree, and they should provide you a platform where if you are willing to provide training, you can go ahead and do that. Because I've done that in Assam. I mean, I am, as I said, this is not a new thing. It happens, I think, all over India with a lot of government schools. So we directly write to the elementary school education department, or the higher board department. They are the main body which supervises all the teachers and all of that. So then they are okay. They kind of organize this event for us where all the teachers come in, and we do like a TOT, like a training of trainers program. And there, we train them, and sometimes they even invite us to the school to kind of do a demo class for them. So yeah, I think that's how we can actually do it. Because if you just walk into the school and ask the teacher, this is what you need to do, they are like anyways so pressurized with so many other responsibilities, and this is the last thing that they would want to do. But if you go to the board and ask them to kind of do this, then they get a letter from the board to the school that they'll have to come and attend this training. So then it becomes easier. So yeah.
Nelson, I had a follow-up question on what you just said. I'm sorry, Shivani, if I'm cutting into your time. Did you so one of course there is this process of getting a letter and a confirmation from the higher authorities. That is one thing. In your experience of working with teachers, and especially say male teachers, let's say even female teachers in government schools for that matter, they've been more receptive and actually have been able to deliver sessions properly, or like you've made them aware of what they should be prepared of. And again, if either of this,
Yeah.
that is mostly in the Northeast or like in the other parts of the country.
Yeah. So, I mean, I completely understand. I mean, see, we really, what we do is we actually get back to their own chapters, and we try to understand how they can actually talk about what is there in their syllabus about the reproductive health, about the menstrual cycle, about the menstrual health. And we just empower them, we just give them techniques of how they can actually just teach what is actually in their syllabus. And if they want more of that, then we kind of, go into a much more detailed structure. But at least let them do what is actually there in the syllabus. They're not even doing that. So, we just handhold, support, and kind of provide them techniques and just kind of make them a little more confident to kind of, teach these chapters. Because usually what they say is that the students who are usually not very talkative and they don't ask any questions, during these chapters, they are the ones who are always raising their hands and they're asking stupid questions or they're asking embarrassing questions. And this is something that the teachers do not like. And hence they avoid, these chapters. But then we tell them that, they are at a stage where because they don't find these answers anywhere. And they feel it's something, this is the right place. And it's not that they want to make you feel embarrassed, but maybe they have certain things in their mind which they want clarity. And it's okay. I mean, you don't have to be very stubborn and have a very teacher-like face and, just be a little more friendlier and be open to questions. So yeah, I mean, what we do is we just teach them how to teach those things that are in the syllabus. And then if they want more, then we get into, a more detailed structure. And then do they really do that way? I mean, we are not able to always follow up, but at times when we're able to follow up, then we see that at least because we give them kits and we give them resource materials, we give them audiovisual CDs that they can use through the projector. So we know that they are at least trying to kind of use all that resource materials.
That's sounding very well, actually. And this is the truth, like female teachers are also not much aware and they don't also want to conduct any kind of sessions or class on that topic. But yeah, this is the good idea to approach the departments and to conduct a training for them. This can be impact on a huge level. Thank you so much. And the second thing is like the menstruation days coming in like May 28th. So is there any kind of material script on menstrual cycle available on Eco Femme website or anywhere else? Because I want to conduct a kid session with the girls on that day, and I haven't any kind of script or material. If you have any kind of script or something like that, so would be helpful for me.
So, I'd just like to add something here, if I am allowed, Kathy, and yeah. So, we're doing a project with the Rotary International, and with them, we've kind of designed a module where we would conduct a training of teachers program. And this is what our kit looks like. This is for the teachers, for making it easy for them to teach. And I'll just show you what's in the kit. So in the kit, we have a CD, which is a very good animated movie that the Maitri speaks, Sinu Joseph, she's actually designed this. So this can be actually shown on the big screen to the students, and it's a very interactive, it's a nice cartoon animated film about periods, about how a girl gets periods. Then in the kit, we also give the Menstrupedia comic, which, every Saturday the children have like a half day and they have extracurricular activities. And we tell the school authorities to kind of make sure that, they spend at least an hour or two to kind of just read this out in the classroom with all the girl students and encourage them to also take this home and read it. So this is there. Then we also have all the menstrual products, like what a disposable pad looks like, what a cloth pad looks like. We also give a tampon and a menstrual cup so that they can use this during their demonstration and not just limit themselves to just saying, hey, pads is the only solution and you need to be using pads. That there are other alternative products, sustainable, eco-friendly products. We also give a pair of underwear so that, you know, so the younger children can learn actually how to use the pads. And we also give the menstrual chart and of course this leaflet. So this is like, I think we've been using this kit with teachers from a very long time for the last 2 years. And this is, and we've got feedback from the teachers that this is actually very helpful. Students are learning a lot. They're asking questions. They're happy to see the products, feel it, and kind of gives them a space where they can actually talk more about it. So yeah, that's one of the kits that we have designed for the teachers to use during training.
So I just want to add something, you know, if I'm allowed. So, the discussion that we are having, you know, of involving the teachers, but for like my experience, like, you know, what has really worked well is also forming like, you know, a child cabinet or something in the school itself, so that, you know, the group which is formed like a club or something, like, you know, from within the students, so that they can also, like, you know, proactively like lead the menstrual hygiene awareness and whatever activities related to menstruation, like, you know, so that has really worked well for like, you know, in my case, when the teachers, sometimes when the teachers are not taking any initiative and when they're like not interested kind of thing, then this the cabinet or this wash club, like, you know, the club which is formed, like they take the major like role, the lead role, and they then, like, you know, go and talk to the teachers, like saying that, you know, this is happening. And also if we form this students club in the like, you know, school, then also, like, you know, they'll be more in contact, because they can also pass on the knowledge of what's being, like, you know, learned. So in that way, like, as a this has worked out very well, like, you know. And for looking at the sustainability part also, like, you know, I think this works. All right, thanks.
Thanks, Swastika and Nelson. I'm very aware of the time, and it is time for us to wrap up. Yes, I just really want to thank all of our panelists for giving, you know, your energy and inspiration to this session. One of the things that we really hope to cultivate through this series was a peer learning community, because obviously we're all kind of feeling our way into this space with menstrual health education. It's still, I think, relatively new field. Nobody, I think, has learned all there is to know. We're all constantly learners, and we're also inspiring each other through our experiments in the field. So again, I think this session has just proved the merit of what's possible when people share just through their courage and experiments to try things out. And I really think that the panelists that we had today, Nelson, Angana and Swastika, you've all been really pioneering experimenters in this space. And really thank you for sharing your insights and your experience, all the wonderful you know, illustrative stories that you gave. I agree with Lauren. I think this is really, in a way, really meaty, and it's the things that I know I'll take away from the session is just the remembering of these little vignettes that you've shared. Lauren, I wonder if there's any sort of closing comments that you would like to add to today's session. Anything you're left with?
I thought that was a very good kind of summing up. I just put a message in the text box, as you said, that we hope this is the beginning of something in terms of peer learning. And Afonso and Shivani, I'm so happy that you asked questions, because these sessions are for you, so that if you ask the question, so it's most helpful to you, that's what makes us happy. And so to both of you and anyone else, if you have any questions or feedback or ideas, you're really welcome to contact us at info@ecofemme.org. I put that email address in our chat. We're happy to continue the conversation, and I think it's one of the really beautiful things about this work, that because it's values driven and people are excited to create menstrual communities of support, empowering girls and women, that there is this sense of connection, and I'm sure our paths will all cross, and look forward to that in the future.
Yeah, thank you, Lauren. I just want to let you all know, in case you haven't sort of tuned into what we have coming up next Monday afternoon at the same time. The theme will be debunking the myth that period blood is dirty and how to promote a more period positive culture. And Angana and Swastika will again be on that panel, and we'll also be joined by another really wonderful facilitator, Serena Joseph, for that conversation. So hopefully you'll be able to join us again. And the final topic in this 4-part series will be the following Monday, and that'll be how to convey the environmental impact of menstrual products without sounding fanatical. And it's something that we have to work really hard at because we are tend to be a little bit fanatical about this cause. But of course, how to do that in a way that doesn't turn people off is also a challenge. So hopefully we'll meet you all again next Monday. And yeah, just thank you for giving your time and all the work that you're all doing to furthering this this mission that we're all so passionate about. And I just wish you all a good week ahead, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank
bye.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
See you all.
Bye.